Welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast with Ben Pakulski, one of the world's top professional bodybuilders, an expert on human performance and mindset mastery. Ben dives deep to deliver the strategies of the top experts to upgrade your body, mind, muscle, strength, performance, biochemistry, and how to become the upgraded modern man. Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back. Ben Pakulski, the host of the Muscle Expert Podcast. Yet again, an amazing guest, someone who's inspiring me over the most recent months. This guy has taken himself from what he calls a lazy human being to creating a billion-dollar company. And I think he's done it all by claiming exclusive ownership for everything he does. And he's done some incredible things, is doing some incredible things, as well as what inspires me the most is the attitude of I can do it and stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get your ass up, get your ass out of bed, and get shit done. So Mr. Tom Bilyeu, man, it's really a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. So this is a bit of a divergence, as you can guess from the Muscle Expert Podcast. But as I said, it's a upgraded modern man mission, right? As I started the Muscle Expert Podcast in 2013 when I was a professional bodybuilder, I've since left and changed my focus to how can I live my greatest life and how can I help leverage my platform and help other guys live their greatest life, man. So my passion now is health optimization and helping people get out of their own way, eliminate their limiting beliefs, which I know you're big on. People are their own worst enemy. You are exactly where you are in your life based on what you believe you should be. And I'd love for you to talk about that, man, because I've watched most things you've done over the last number of months. And I know you talk a little bit about the fixed versus the growth mindset, the Carol Dweck theory, and as well as just overcoming your limiting beliefs. So I'd like for you to start by telling people a little bit about where you were 15 years ago and, where you've come from, because people want to hear that stuff, man, because everybody says, oh, you came from this, you came from that, you're just naturally successful, or you're born into, maybe you're a born entrepreneur. I know you talk about that, talking about all that stuff and giving people a little bit of a history and some insight as to who Tom really is.
Cool, man. I think that's a really good place to start. So as you said, I am not a born entrepreneur. And to me, that's a bit like saying you're a born bodybuilder. Like maybe you have a frame or something, but at the end of the day, you got to lift a whole lot of weights.
Yep.
You got to lift a whole lot of weights. You got to learn about nutrition. You have to push yourself. You have to find out where your personal limit with pain is and really continue to push that threshold back. So yeah, I'm not a big believer in we're born one way or we're not. It really comes down to what world are you going to construct for yourself? What are you going to do to your mind to empower yourself, and what skill set are you prepared to acquire? And that is unfortunately things that I've had to learn the hard way. So growing up, my parents taught me to be a good employee, which means keep your head down, do as little work as possible, and avoid punishment at all costs. And that's really where I started. And that was my view on the world at one point after college. I considered myself the king of remedial jobs. And I said that with pride. And I thought that was really clever. And not realizing that was, all a fixed mindset. It was me wanting to be the smartest person in the room, priding myself on being smart, on being right. And to protect that and to make sure that I was the smartest person in the room, I had to go into dumber and dumber rooms, to really make sure, that I was protecting that ego. And finally, just realizing that I had these grand ambitions. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be playing on a global stage, but being the king of remedial jobs, being lazy, laying in bed for 3 hours every morning, none of that stuff was leading me anywhere. And it really was a collision that I had in college where I realized I was not a talented filmmaker, that I needed a new belief system just to not be depressed. And as I really tried to think about what had happened, what it meant to be talented or not talented, what could you learn, where are the limits of teachability, adaptability, and in that process began to realize, one, that reading was transforming my life, which I started really to do well in college. And that was the beginning of my reading. And then reflecting back and going, I've already come a long way. how much farther can I go? And I ended up teaching not long out of college, teaching filmmaking. And in doing that, began to watch how my students were growing. And so I'm like, okay, they're encountering new ideas. They're changing fundamentally as artists. And so that really let me reflect back on because I think there's a few things that people have in their heads that just are immutable truths. You're either born with it or you're not. Art, singing, like those are two of them. And now, most terrifyingly, being an entrepreneur. And it drives me nuts that people are like reinforcing that that's something you're either born with or you're not. Now, look, I'm not saying that we don't come out with predispositions, right? There's just certain things that some people are going to take to more easily than others. But working hard is going to win out over talent that doesn't work hard every time, right? So think about the most genetically gifted bodybuilder you've ever met. If they don't put in the work, they're just not going to go anywhere. And that is true of everything. So sure, it would be amazing to have like insane work ethic and have the genetic predisposition. But at the end of the day, honestly, I think genetic predisposition is 10, maybe 20% of your potential success. So 80 to 90% is just how hard do you work and how smart and diligent are you about it, right? So you're not just throwing a bunch of hours at something. You're throwing a bunch of hours at it in a disciplined, controlled fashion. And so my life has just been proof that matters a lot more. So not a born entrepreneur, but I've succeeded as an entrepreneur at the highest levels.
I think being born an entrepreneur may just be as simple as the paradigm of questioning everything. That's one thing that I almost pride myself in is why? Always asking the question, well, why is that the way? Why does the world that we see it exist the way it is? And does it need to be that way? And I think that may be your greatest asset is looking at the world and going, I can make this better. This is I'm living somebody else's dream right now. I can live my own dream. I can make this better. And from my perspective, that's the number one attribute of an entrepreneur, right? A really good entrepreneur can get away doing no work. If they're really good at delegating and they're really good at influencing people and being a good leader. But really, I think a great entrepreneur is just someone who's challenging things. As Simon Sinek says, he's challenging the norm or challenging people's paradigm.
Agreed. Even that I had to learn. So even that, like something so rudimentary and fundamental, like I took the world the way that it was and made absolutely no efforts to change it. And honestly, didn't think that I had the ability to impact it. I don't have the natural instinct to ask why, but you can train yourself to do that. I mean, my whole thesis is that all of this stuff is trainable, and that if you see a strategy that somebody's using and it's working, then adopt it, right? And I totally agree with you. Asking why, pushing back, challenging it and saying, okay, it is this way, but it doesn't need to be this way. And can you actually adopt that as a mindset? And I think the answer is yes, definitively. And it may take work. You may feel like you're fighting against your natural instincts, but if your natural instincts don't lead you where you want to go, then fight against your natural instincts you must. And so my whole thing is, okay, what makes humans the apex predator? Like, what is it? And people are going to say, oh, it's, the prefrontal cortex or it's the neocortex. It's our ability to do high-level thinking. Okay, great. But what does that let you do? And ultimately, to me, what it lets you do is it lets you be an adaptation machine. We're the only species you can find in every corner of the globe, from literally diving to the depths of the Marianas Trench to living in the Arctic Circle. We can thrive everywhere. And we can do that. I mean, like if you really want to get down to the science of it, when they were looking at human DNA and they saw that we only have 20,000 genes and like certain onions have like 40,000 genes, they're like, what the hell? Like, how is it possible that an onion is more complicated from a DNA perspective than we are? But, oh, what's all this junk DNA? And don't worry about that. That's meaningless. And of course, now they're realizing that's the human epigenetic response mechanism, right? That we respond to our environment. We respond profoundly, so that if you take somebody into the Arctic Circle, watch what happens to their brown fat, right? And why brown fat? Because it generates heat. So it's like you can force yourself through all of this adaptation by putting yourself under a stressor. And I love talking to bodybuilders because nobody gets that more than a bodybuilder.
Right.
But now if you can take that and say it's not just the body that responds to adaptive stress, it's the mind. So was I born with an entrepreneur's mind? No, but I can put myself under adaptive stress, reading books, holding myself to a standard, coming up with mental techniques, routines, habits, like all of it, to construct a mind that's as radically different in form and function as a bodybuilder that goes from the under-muscled dweeb hard gainer to, being on stage and being able to crush it.
Amazing. I got to ask, what was the catalyst? So obviously you said, in some of your recent interviews, you were laying in bed for up to 3 hours in the morning, and something was the switch that went off in your mind, or maybe went off in your life and said, hey man, I got to change this. And so another question I think I want to get clarity on is, did you go to school for film, or how did you end up in marketing or entrepreneurship?
Yeah, went to school for film, and it's a long story of how I ended up in marketing, but I'll happily tell it. You tell me what path you want to go down here.
Well, yeah, I'm just curious. I was curious if you went to school for marketing at all, but let's go down the path of the catalyst, because I think that's very, very interesting. What was the catalyst? Because you got a lot of people sitting home going, man, I'm not happy with my life, because they believe everyone's making an excuse, right? Everyone's like, the government, or my job, or my body, or my genetics, or whatever it is. It's same in bodybuilding, man. I deal with it every single day. Is people are just putting themselves in this box of where they think they exist or where they have to exist, and you've managed to transcend that box. What was the catalyst?
Through self-hatred, all things are possible.
Yeah,
and
fear. Yep.
And I know how that sounds, and I know for somebody who's not ready to hear that message, that's like triggering.
Oh man.
What I mean by that is, you get in your life what you accept. And for a distressingly long time, I accepted laziness. I accepted a lack of success. I wanted a lot of things, but I didn't fan those flames to turn them into a crushing need that drove my every action, that threw me out of bed in the morning, because I so did not want to be that lazy person anymore. And so really it began in film school. Unfortunately, nothing's as clean as, I woke up, I had one moment, and then everything was great. But in film school, I failed. I failed miserably in my final thesis film. And I went from thinking that I was the shit, I was the man, I was crushing it, I was going to get a 3-picture deal, everything I touched turned to cinematic gold, to realizing actually no, you're terrible at this. You've only begun the journey of figuring this out. And literally, to avoid depression, I needed a new mindset that allowed me to believe that I could get good. And honestly, in the beginning, it didn't matter if it was true. I needed to believe it. And then I started going down that path of reading, learning, practicing, trying, failing, but accepting that I could get better and I could learn from those failures. And then as I started realizing, oh my God, this actually works. The harder I work, the more I focus, the more I practice, the better I get, and the less talent seems relevant, or at least the less talent seems either you have it or you don't. And it started to feel like I can actually learn this stuff, which was really a profound breakthrough. So at the end of film school, that's what happened. Then I start teaching, and I fall in love, and I move to London, and I go through that period where I'm so lazy that I'm not getting out of bed. And this is the truth of the matter. My wife was working and making money, and I was staying at home and laying in bed for hours and hours and hours. And that made me feel so disgusted with myself that I was like, I don't accept this anymore. And so I began to push myself. I began to get out of bed out of anger. What kind of lazy dumbass literally just sits here and burns this amount of his life? I feel disgusting. I'm about to marry this woman. I can't be that guy. That's not acceptable for me. And it literally, the biggest changes in my life have started from that. I don't like what I see when I look in the mirror. And when I talk to people about that, look, I believe self-compassion is probably the most important thing you can do. But like anything, when you take it too far, then it actually becomes detrimental. If you take the self-loathing too far, it becomes corrosive. If you take the self-compassion too far, you accomplish nothing. So my thing is an 80-20 split. I spend 20% of my time absolutely horrified with what I've accomplished in my life, and 80% of the time filled with compassion for understanding how hard it is, understanding the beautiful things that I want to do in life, looking at just the positive things that I have, being grateful for what I've already accomplished. But I know how to leverage that kick in the ass to get up and get going. And that's where I think a lot of people fall down is either, and look, I think, by the way, I am not the right person for many people to listen to, and I am very aware of that. And if you want a stress-free life, if you want to sit around the fireplace and read your kids a story every night, dude, that is amazing. That's an amazing life, and for the right person. I don't judge that. I don't think my way is the right way. I just think it's right for me. So for people that resonate with that, cool. I've got all the tricks and techniques that you're going to need to actually accomplish. But I want to play on a world stage. I want to impact the world on a tangible, measurable level. So for me, it's like these are the things that those goals necessitate.
Amazing. Like Tony Robbins says, right? I'm sure you're a fan of Tony Robbins, is you got to get disturbed if you want to make a change. Complacency is probably the biggest enemy. So you're obviously in a place of complacency when you're in that position. Was it the type of thing where you were teaching and making money, so you just kind of didn't feel like you need to get out of bed those days, or were you actually not making money at that time as well?
At that time, I wasn't making money at all. And that's probably good, because if I had been able to do that and provide, then I don't know that I certainly wouldn't have gotten out of that mode as fast.
Completely agree, man. I just wrote an email the other day about there was a period in my life not so long ago where I was making 20 grand a month for doing nothing. And I said, most people go, that's amazing. And I go, that's the worst thing that ever happened to me, because I wasn't hungry. I wasn't motivated. Like normally I'm like ruthlessly attacking my goals. And I went through this period where someone was just handing me a 20 grand check every month. And I just kind of rested on it. And, everyone goes, oh, I wish I could have that. And like, I said, I don't wish that on my worst enemy, man. It's the worst thing. And then you look back at it, and then all of a sudden somebody removes it from you, they take it from you. You go, fuck, I just wasted X amount of time. This is a big, big problem. So being complacent is definitely your worst enemy. And I'm so grateful now for having had that removed. And now I can actually move on and be motivated to overcome the obstacles. So speaking about overcoming, that was a long period to where you became a successful entrepreneur, a billion-dollar business owner. Do you think that teaching the people at Quest was part of your evolution as a man?
Yeah, no question. And I really do believe in the adage that you learn best when you're teaching. There's just something about it. It forces you to concretize your own thinking. It forces you to codify everything into lessons that you can pass on. It really forces you to just get massive clarity. So yeah, I'm very grateful for being an entrepreneur and living a life of leadership and putting myself in that position, which is, for a lot of people, it's not the right position. There's a crushing amount of responsibility when you wake up every day and know that there's a lot. I mean, back at Quest, there was 1,400 people whose livelihood depended on my ability to execute. So there's tremendous stress and responsibility in that. But dude, I want that more than I can tell you. Like, I want that. I want that on my shoulders. I want everyone to be looking to me and expecting me to deliver. Like, I want that expectation. And so, yeah, that continues to be a driving force in my life, having employees that I desperately want to help get something amazing out of life, for sure.
So you say you want it. Is that from a perspective of you just like to work under pressure?
No, it's from a perspective of my goals mandate a certain level of execution from me. And when you have people that are counting on you, there's no days off. And I want that, right? So like you were saying, having that $20K a month taken away, it sharpens you. It makes you hungry. So look, I will be the first to admit one of the hardest challenges of my life was becoming incredibly wealthy. And then you're living in the Beverly Hills mansion and you've got the fancy car, and like, how the fuck do you stay hungry? And how do you stay hungry at like an unprecedented level? And so that was like, okay, this is a challenge now that I can get excited about overcoming, and making sure that my focus is on something else entirely, that all I think about is building this team up, executing at the highest level, playing on the world stage, building something that matters, that lasts, that has the kind of impact that I want to have, and having those people who are like turning to you for that leadership, holding things together, pushing things forward. Like, that just keeps you laser focused.
I love that you said that. So one of the questions that I get all the time, and I know you get this all the time, is, Tom, how do I find my passion? And how do you keep your passion? And I know the answer. And I want you to talk about your vision, because without clarity of vision, without clarity of purpose, nothing else exists. So can you give us a bit of an insight and a bit of a conversation about your vision and what that purpose is for you now that you've exceeded what you probably believed you may have accomplished to this time in your life?
Yeah, for sure, man. And I hope your listeners are really paying attention to that. without clarity of purpose, without clarity of vision, you really are lost, man.
Don't stand
And
a
that is
chance.
one thing. Yeah, dude. Like,
Yep.
I just don't know how to make that more clear to people. Like, any question about how do you accomplish, achieve, like whatever, it all starts with, what are your goals? And if you say that your goal is to get rich, awesome. If you say that your goal is to provide for your family, fantastic. All of that is vague. You need something that is so specific. How are you going to get rich? How are you going to take care of your family? Or the worst, lean in nice and close. This is the most insidious. I want to change the world. Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
But how?
Right.
In what very specific way? So I'll walk you through my process of doing something like this. So at Quest, mission was end metabolic disease. How do you do that? You make food that people can choose based on taste that happens to be good for them. Because telling the entire world to eat less and exercise more just is not a winning solution. Mm-hmm. So we've been trying it for 60 years and it hasn't delivered the results. So you have to change something. So that was our strategy. When we went to the manufacturers to say, hey, we made this bar that we think is the right first step, tastes great, they said it can't be made. And so because our goal was so clear, and metabolic disease, we can work backwards. When they tell us to add high fructose corn syrup or some other liquid sugar, we can't, because that would move us away from our goal. So instead of then being able to leverage the manufacturers that were already making protein bars, we had to become our own manufacturer. We tried buying off-the-shelf equipment. They were right. It didn't work. So then we had to engineer our own equipment. But when you know what your goal is, suddenly you can work backwards into that scenario and know what you need to do. Now that I've left Quest, I've started a new company, Impact Theory. It was me saying, okay, there are two pandemics that we face as a society. One is the body. I think that's very clear. Everybody understands that one. It's very easy to see people as they literally eat themselves to death. Mm-hmm. But the other is the mind. And the pandemic of the mind is depression, it's anxiety, it's feeling lost, it's all the sense of hopelessness that's becoming to pervade society more and more and more. And what's the real answer to that? And looking at the science, it became very clear that the answer is the only way that human beings assimilate truly disruptive information, which you need to do to give them a totally different worldview, belief system, is through narrative. And so how do we at scale, because that's what I care about, how do we at scale change people's belief system? Because a belief system, if you've never seen the talk that David Foster Wallace gave called This is Water, watch it. That is transformative. And it talks about how, like a fish is the last to realize that water exists because it is so ever present, people are the last to realize what their belief system is because it is so ever present. They don't even realize it was a choice. They don't realize that their parents are passing on something that their parents passed on to them, that the culture reinforces certain beliefs and norms. And so they just construct this belief system without realizing that they've been building it around themselves. It may or may not be advantageous for what they want to accomplish in life. So the only way to disrupt that is to really get at the fabric of how culture creates that belief system, which is traditional narrative. So normally it's the way that a culture builds its ideologies through mythology. Now, for a long time, we didn't know that they were myths. We didn't know that they were fake. But we're now living in an era where virtually every myth, even the great religions, people are like, I don't actually believe it. I don't take it literally for sure. And so now it's like, how do you know what to assimilate into your belief system? So what we want to do with Impact Theory is say, okay, I don't want to change behavior. I want to leverage it. I know that people are already reading books, reading comic books, watching TV shows, movies, and playing video games. I know that. And in that, they're assimilating pieces of their identity. But nobody, no studios out there are intentionally making pure entertainment, by the way, but entertainment that at its core is a belief system that will empower you. Now, they do it as one-offs. The Matrix absolutely changed my life. The Jedi religion at the heart of Star Wars is wildly empowering. And if you listen, there is no try, do or do not. I mean, it's like it's full of all this incredibly powerful stuff. Like when Luke is trying to lift the rock and he can do it, but then he goes to lift the spaceship and he says, oh, but that's different. And Yoda says, no, it's only different in your mind. I mean, it's like a bodybuilder not recognizing that, sure, maybe you can't lift 50 pounds today, or you can't deadlift 1,000 pounds today, but you actually can build up to that. It's only different in your mind. It's the same work. It's the same process. It's lifting and eating right and pushing, and it's going to lead you there. But when you believe in your mind that it's impossible, then you're right. So it happens every now and then, right? You'll get a movie, you'll get a franchise or something that has something really powerful at its core, but people dismiss it. Either because it's such a one-off, it's in the cacophony of noise of disempowering stuff, or just nobody's telling them that you don't have to believe it's real to see the ideology and pull it into your life. So I believe that the timing is right now with what's going on in social commentary, for podcasts like this to talk about this stuff, and then to marry that to actual traditional content, comic books, TV shows, so on and so forth, that actually have this stuff at its heart. So, but that, like all of that is a diatribe just to explain, I start with a goal. I want to pull people out of the matrix. I want to help people get rid of their limiting beliefs. But how do I actually execute against that?
At a grand
scale.
And
it ends up, right?
Yep.
And so it ends up with me identifying very concrete steps. So I won't take up all the podcasts on this, but I'll just give you an insight. I consider impact theory to be a merchandise company. Now, my goal is to pull people out of the matrix. My goal is to build a studio, but you have to work back to something that's self-sustaining. And if you look at Disney, which is the most successful studio of all time, you'll see that they're a merchandise company. So now I understand what I actually have to do. I understand what I actually have to get good at. I understand what my skill set needs to be because of the specificity of my goal and my plan to get there.
Amazing, man. Speaking to that, like I stopped watching television about 7 years ago. Don't even have, well, we have one in my house now, but we don't watch it except on the weekends where we have Netflix. For that exact reason, is everything you turn on is negative, and it's shaping just the complete wrong belief system is how the world is this inherently bad place. People are out to hurt you. You have to protect yourself. It's just driving fear into the brain of the population. So the time is perfect for what you're doing. Like, let's instill some decent values, some decent moral stories, reintroduce mythology with actually teaching kids great character traits that people are hungry for this kind of stuff. Because like, you turn on the TV, what is it? Something's blown up, somebody's killing somebody else. It's everything, just this constant perpetuation of the negative message. So, man, people are craving it, and you're absolutely doing it at the right time. And obviously, the fact that you're doing it as a merchandise company is brilliant, modeling after Disney, because I'm very familiar with their model. And I mean, it's 80% merchandise, right? I don't know the numbers, but I'm guessing, I'm speculating.
It's high.
Yeah, it's massive. But what a brilliant model. Amazing, man. So I heard you mention something about Joseph Campbell and the power of myth. Was that one of your greatest influences in this thought process? Because I'm looking at this thought process and going, there's not many human beings that think at that level. And I'm curious as to what influenced that thought process for you.
Nobody more than Joseph Campbell. That book changed my life. So I don't like tattoos, not a believer in tattoos, but I read the book, The Power of Myth, and he talks about how one of the biggest problems he sees in society is because we no longer believe in mythology, we no longer have rituals that have like real power to them. So you get this sort of stunted adolescence where there's no transition between childhood and adulthood. There's no transition between single life and married life. And he said rituals used to really demarcate these moments. And he talked about how at 13, like you knew you were a man because the guys came and drug you away from the women. They took you out into the woods and they circumcised you with no anesthetic. Like, you want to talk about something that lets you know, hey, like you're a man. As of right now, this moment, no more bullshit. Like your life is totally different now. And we don't have those anymore. So reading that book, he's talking about marriage. He's talking about how like the marriage ceremonies and stuff, they just don't carry the weight that they used to. And people don't have a sense of I'm a different person the day before and the day after. And so I said, okay, as a part of my marriage, I'm going to go through a ritualistic scarification. And so even though I don't like tattoos, even though I don't believe in them, I had a tattoo designed, which was basically my commitment to my wife. And I got it tattooed on myself as a part of that transition so that I would know I am fundamentally and forever a different person. I am not a single person anymore. I am now part of a unit, and that I am forever changed. And that really was a big deal for me. And in the beginning, when I really was still like building this mindset and I didn't have it all in place, that really helped me begin that process of how do you take in ideology? How do you construct intentionally your mindset, your belief system, and really start putting intention behind that? And that absolutely started with that book.
Amazing. So it's almost like the idea of like a hazing, or I don't know if that's the correct word, but being brought into a fraternity, right? Where, for the rest of your life, you're going to remember this. Are you doing something with your followers and teaching them this idea? Because this is not something I've ever heard before, man. And I think it would be massively valuable for people to instill in their life is when something massive happens, to think of a way to ingrain it, to anchor it into your subconscious. Is this something you're being very transparent about and talking about a lot?
I've talked about it like I've talked about it just now, and this will definitely be something that'll be in the content that we're creating. I don't yet have a great way. So this gets into something that my team gets really squeamish when I start talking about, but there are elements to religion that I think are incredibly powerful, and how do we incorporate them into and look, I know that we're not like beyond religion, and there's still people who are profoundly touched and transformed by that. And I think that it's amazing when it's uplifting and when it makes people more compassionate. But I think that even in just a secular way, there's room for some of the rituals and burning in of the ideology through repetition and things like that I would love to find a way to incorporate. I have a loose vision for how we'll pull that off, but it's not concrete enough for me to really talk about yet.
You're not gonna let me dig into that, man, because that's I'm very curious.
You can dig. I don't really have anything. So the honest answer is I don't know what that looks like in a way where it doesn't feel cheesy and it doesn't just feel like an echo of religion, which I don't want it to be. So this isn't me being coy. Like my whole thing is like, if you watch my content, my objective is anybody that's willing to outwork me could literally take my ideas, because I am giving everything. Like I tell people exactly what we're trying to do.
Yep.
I mean, literally, I just certainly at a thumbnail level laid out exactly how we're going to build the studio. But literally, I'm not pulling any punches. I'm not holding anything back, just because I'm so confident no one can outwork me.
Right.
That I have no problem putting that out in the world. So if I had something, man, I would tell you. And if people have ideas, dude, I'm all ears. But I do want to find a way. I think proximity is a big thing. I think people have to get together. So I think there's ultimately going to be getting together as a group element to it. I just think that being next to somebody and getting to know them and having the social pressures of a large group of people that you're with physically, believing, having a similar mindset, reinforcing those belief systems together, I think is going to be a critical part of that. But how you do that, I don't yet know.
Drink the Kool-Aid. Are you a spiritual guy, Tom?
Yeah, I would say deeply spiritual, but not religious in the slightest.
Tell me a little bit about your practices, or like how you maintain a spiritual connection.
All right, so now we're going to get really weird. So the easy one,
that's in, man.
The easy one is I meditate.
Yep.
And that is really just a quieting of the mind so that you can hear your intuition.
Yep.
You can really listen to yourself, because I think people daily. Yeah. Daily. I think people are expecting their intuition to shout, and it's never going to. And so you're going to have to create that quiet space to really hear it. The right parietal lobe is the thing that makes you feel either connected or disconnected from the world. And that's the thing that is basically used in navigation. So if you want to navigate your way around the world, you need to know where you end. Okay. And this is the thing that creates a deep sense of separation from other people. And you need that. You need to know, like, this is where I end. And so I can move myself around. And so when people do, which by the way, I have never done, I don't do drugs, I even rarely drink, but I'm fascinated by psychotropics, which one of the things that you hear a lot about from some of them, and again, I'm not an expert here, but I've read enough about it to sort of get the gist, is it shuts off the right parietal lobe. So people literally cease to know where they end, and they'll come back talking about this deep communion with the universe, feeling at one with everything. And so understanding the brain regions of that, to me, is very interesting. So I study the brain a lot as an act of spirituality, understanding myself, why I perceive myself as separate from others, the nature of compassion, that stuff. And then trying to really understand, like, what is the true and fundamental nature of this thing that we experience as the world around us. So I just spent time yesterday, in fact, with – not the only time. There's this guy who's his name is Spiros. I can't pronounce, which is embarrassing. His last name is something like Michaelides. I'm mispronouncing it slightly. Greek guy. My wife is Greek, so I should know how to pronounce his name. But he's one of like the foremost thinkers in physics. super fascinating guy, talking about how at the quantum level, essentially everything is chaos and the patterns only arise as you come up. But the whole notion of quantum entanglement is because of correlation. And just his idea, like, I don't want to derail onto a deep thing in physics.
Man,
I'm so clumsy that I'll embarrass myself. But also, but if you're interested, I'll go a little bit deeper.
I'd love to hear about it.
So his whole concept, he believes, and he's pretty dogged about this, but I just don't have enough context in the world of physics to know if everyone agrees with him or not. But he's at Caltech right now. This guy is insanely bright and is very good at explaining this stuff. And basically, he's talking about how, without question, we're all in the matrix, but not in the matrix the way that we think of, like you're not actually in a computer simulation. His whole thing is that basically the world that you see and perceive around you is the result of a bell curve. So if you think of a bell curve, the top of the bell is just the things that are most likely to occur. Mm-hmm. So he's saying that truly at the quantum level, the reason that people are unable to unify the macro and the ultra micro is because what you're seeing at the macro level, the things that we think of as Newtonian physics or general relativity from Einstein, is because you're looking at these macro patterns. Now, these macro patterns just happen to be the most probable variations of the universe. And what Spiros talks about, and this is the part I don't understand well enough, I'm so intrigued and I want to learn more. But he said there is a way mathematically to shift perspective. And as you shift perspective, then you can see the less likely but still present, we just don't experience them, variations of the universe. And so his goal is to show mathematically how as you come, like, if you, again, think of the bell curve, like out here, right, this is bodybuilders. If you're thinking of a physique, right, most people are just sort of at the top of the bell curve and they have that average physique that we all sort of identify as average. But then as you go down here, you get people that are bigger and leaner until you get sort of over here, like as it's almost flattening out. And the people that exist there, they look like you. And it's the people that take stage and they're like 2% body fat and they're fucking gigantic. But it's so rare, right? So his thing is, imagine if experimentally you could take those, like, and this is basically go to the Olympia or the Arnold, and suddenly everywhere you look, you see people that exist in like that little tail. So he's saying if mathematically, if experimentally, or even more importantly, experientially, you could shift your perspective, and just to use the analogy, to literally walk into the Las Vegas Convention Center during the Olympia is like the shift in perspective that he's talking about. So now you can see these people all over everywhere, and you can really begin to experience all of the alternate physical variations in this example, or in his example, the alternate variations of the universe. You could really understand how at the quantum level, the reason that it seems that there's no correlation between how things work at the quantum level and how they work at this higher level is because you only see the patterns as you come up. But as you go down into the quantum level, he's saying only chaos reigns. Like it's actual chaos. And so I said, are you saying that literally the universe that we experience now is essentially the universe? Have you heard that example? If you put enough monkeys, like the definition of infinity, put a monkey at a typewriter and he's banging on it randomly, eventually in one of those variations, he writes War and Peace. Right? Just randomly hitting the keys.
Okay.
But for true infinity to exist, one of those variations would have to be that moment where completely at random is hitting those keys. Yep. So basically we're living in, so if up here the variations of the monkey banging away at the keyboard are, whatever the random variables would be, we're that monkey variation that's most probable. And so you see something, you see all these patterns, you think, oh, this is the way that it has to be, it's ordained by a creator or something. His theory, and the thing, and this is me explaining my spirituality, by the way, but this to me is so fucking fascinating and makes me feel more alive and more grateful for being a human and more just an absolute awe of what we're seeing, is that this is but one of a gazillion, I don't even know, like a number big enough, but like one of these infinite number of variations. It just happens to be a high probable variation. So I'll stop there, largely because I don't understand it well enough to go any farther than that. I want to be very clear about that. But that explaining that to you, like if you could put me in an fMRI right now, you would see how excited I am, right? And how that makes me feel in awe. It puts me in a state of awe. It isn't disappointing to me. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's beautiful. It's fascinating. it makes me realize there are just things about this world that we do not understand. And in that lack of understanding, I am left with my jaw agape and my life feeling more worthwhile than ever. It's just infinitely fascinating.
Amazing. So that actually goes hand in hand with one of the things that you always say is everyone goes through life, and we actually have, the two dime size holes in our field of vision that your brain fills in. So ultimately, we're going in with this really, really narrow perspective on things. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, even more terrifying than that it's narrow is that your brain is
Making it up.
making it up.
Yeah.
And that was really powerful for me. So right now, I'm looking around the room. I have no sense that there is parts missing. But like you said, where your optic nerve connects to your eyeball, there's a dime-sized black hole. You see nothing. And your brain just goes, it's probably this. And it puts it in. And if you've ever seen something move out of the corner of your eye and you look and there's nothing actually did move, you have that experience of your brain is making something up. When I realized that, I thought, okay, wait a second. If my brain is lying to me with the best of intentions, but it's lying, it's making it up, how much of what it's making up is not useful? How much of the anxiety, the fear, the anything that I have, self-doubt, how much of it's fake? And if it's fake, can I choose to ignore it? And once I realized that you might as well assume it's all fake and that objective reality doesn't really exist, or if it does, you can't really perceive it anyway. Like we only see a certain wavelength of light. We think that's what they call the Umwelt. For us, our Umwelt is our perceived sum total of the world, but like sharks can read electricity, bats use echolocation. Like, did you ever see the movie Daredevil with Ben Affleck?
No. I'm familiar with it, but I've never seen it.
It's a horrid movie. Don't watch it, but I'll give you the one part that was actually really cool, and it's the best example of what I imagine echolocation is like for a bat. So he's using, in the movie, he's blind, he's using echolocation, and you see the room that he's in get painted kind of like if Matrix code were running down the walls. So it shows like the contours and where people are, but you're not actually seeing them. You're just seeing like a shape, but it's so detailed that he can make out where everything is. And I thought that is almost certainly what it's like for a bat. They're not seeing like you and I see, but they can navigate so precisely. They can snatch an insect out of the air while they're moving. So clearly they have a very detailed map of what's going on. But we don't experience any of that, even though it's there. We just don't have the devices to perceive it. So as I began to realize, Jesus, there's this whole world. It exists. Empirically, it can be checked and tested and measured, but we don't experience it. So just because we happen to have these limited senses doesn't mean that that's what you have to use to navigate and experience the world. So when you make that a mental thing, I don't have to believe my emotions, which is the most obvious. So your subconscious can process data, what they call faster and vaster. So it can process way more data than your conscious mind, and it can process it much, much faster. But now, how can it communicate that? Because if it tries to use words, which is the language of your conscious mind, you're screwed, right? You're back into the limitations of what the conscious mind can process. So I believe, and this is not my theory, but this is a theory that I've read, and I think that makes a lot of sense, is that the subconscious is actually kicking up emotions as a very rapid way of assessing a situation. So imagine you're a baboon and you see some bananas, but you also see a lion on the other side in the bushes waiting to see what you do. And you will instantly get a feeling of either go for it or don't go for it. That feeling is the mass amount of data. What's the terrain like? Is it slippery? Is it rocky? Is it even? Is it going to have good traction? Where's my energy levels? Do I think, that I can sprint? How much attention is the lion paying? Is it really lasered in? Does it look like it's ready to strike? Does it look hungry? All of those things. But you're not processing that. You just get a feeling. Either go for it or don't. Mm-hmm. And so once you begin to understand, okay, I don't have to believe that. That's merely my body's limited way of processing this data, kicking it up to my conscious mind. So if I look in the mirror and I think, oh man, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm dumb, I'm whatever, you don't have to believe that. And so you can begin to take control of your mind. You can begin to do things like my highest recommendation to everybody: do and believe that which moves you towards your goals. So if believing that you're dumb, fat, ugly, whatever moves you towards your goals, do it. But if believing that you're dumb, fat, and ugly doesn't move you towards your goals, then don't believe it because it doesn't serve you. So that's, yeah.
I think the biggest thing you're asking people to do to begin with, step one, become present. Obviously, you've been on a journey for the last 15 years to becoming more present, becoming more aware of your thoughts, because most people aren't aware that these things exist, right? Most people aren't aware of their subconscious programming. I'd like to dig into some of the habits you've created over the last 10 and 15 years that have allowed you to be this level functioning human. So, I believe that I'm on a quest to be at that level too. And I'm a constant seeker. I'm a constant reader. I'm a constantly trying to acquire knowledge. So there's a certain skill set that you've acquired that allow you to transcend the mountain, transcend the reality that everyone else, transcend the matrix that everyone else lives in, right? What are they?
So the things that we've been talking about, namely not believing your emotions, believing that you can do anything you set your mind to, that you can learn this stuff, that was really first and foremost.
But how did you convince yourself that was all true? Because reality, most people don't think that that's possible, right? Most people think their life is their life, and they have no control over it. So where did that start? I'm very curious. I mean, other than being disturbed.
The Matrix. In 1999, I went to a Comic-Con. I walked around the corner, and there was Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, Joe Pantoliano, Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne,
yep.
Joel Silver, like the whole crew. And they were like, "Hey, everybody, literally," I was like, "What?" Like, I had no idea that they were there. And they said, "We're handing out tickets. Anybody here gets to go see a screening tonight at Warner Brothers Studios of The Matrix." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I saw that trailer. It actually looks really interesting." And I remember thinking this movie's either going to be amazing or horrific. I had no idea which. And I'm sitting in the movie theater at Warner Brothers. So it wasn't like, you're at a mall somewhere. Like, you're actually at Warner Brothers, which was already cool. And do you remember that part? Have you seen it? All right. You remember the part where Carrie-Anne Moss jumps up and does that kick and it goes into slow motion and the camera dollies around her?
Yeah.
All right, at that moment, everyone in the audience screamed out loud, started clapping. It was, even myself, it was unlike any other cinematic experience I've ever had. It was unbelievable. And by the end of the movie, I walked out going, I choose to believe that's real. Like, I choose to believe that we can learn things like that we can get better. Like, the fact that Keanu Reeves fell when he first tries to do the jump, the fact that he gets shot first and dies before he realizes he can stop the bullets, like, all of that made me go, there's an element of the mind here. And that's what the movie is all about. It's what he allows himself to believe, right? The Oracle tells him what he needs to hear. It's all about finally getting his mind in the right place. So, and it wasn't binary. I didn't walk out like, now I get it. But it, that planted this seed in my mind. It gave me a metaphor to hold on to that allowed me to really understand how to think of the world. So I began to ask myself, what is the Matrix? I don't actually think we're in the Matrix. So what is that? What's the modern day equivalent? And I realized for me it was reading. And then I was like, okay, what's my kung fu? And I realized that my answer was business. So you begin to put things onto this metaphor, and the metaphor is robust enough that it allows you to reflect back in your own life. And of course, that seed that was planted ends up becoming impact theory. Exactly that moment that I had and how profoundly it ends up echoing through my life and really changing my life is exactly what I want to do. But I want to do it in a very consistent basis. So, while the Matrix spoke to me, how many other people saw that, but it didn't impact them the way that it impacted me? And it's just like, you might tell somebody the same thing and they just don't, 100 times, and they don't get it. And then you use a different metaphor and they're like, oh my God, now I get it. So that's really the goal. So that was the seed that got planted. And then, it echoes. I read books on the topic and mindset just from countless different angles, meet people who also think like that, read comic books. Comic books have had a huge impact on my life. So all of this stuff, just piece by piece, there's no sort of one thing, but piece by piece, it really becomes, looking back 20 years later, it's a very robust mindset that's made up of all these differing sources.
Referring back to what Mr. Spiros Michaelides said, do you think that after that movie, people who think the same way became more apparent to you in your life?
Yes. And I don't know that in the beginning it was about other people that resonated specifically with the Matrix, but people that resonated, and I didn't have Carol Dweck's book back then because it didn't exist. So I didn't have the words growth mindset, but people that believed you could get better. They began to be the people that I collected. And so I began to have a lot of people in my life that thought like that, and that was powerful. Having people reinforce that in you. You know, they say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Dude, that's so true.
Yep.
And so having people that had that same growth mindset was super important in my development.
So what are the man habits or the daily habits that you've instilled for the last 10 years that have allowed you to continue, other than meditation? Is there anything you insist on a daily basis, or some of the thought processes that you go through that allow you to live this life?
Yeah. So working out first and foremost. Now, I hate working out, full disclosure. And, but it's so powerful to suffer, to put yourself through something hard on a daily basis, to show up every day, to earn that credibility with yourself. And for me to not want to do it and still do it adds even more juice to the fire. To see the transformation, to know that like I can actually change my body. And once like seeing how real that was for me really made it easy to believe that I could change my mind. Like physically, I could change the physical structures of my mind, and that, you know, form follows function. So if you can change the functioning, the way that your brain actually works, like could you get something different out of it? And so, yeah, that's very easy to believe, showing up in the gym every day and putting yourself through that. But like David Goggins says, I just really believe that you meet yourself in times of suffering. So going in the gym, feeling the burn of lactic acid, pushing your legs so hard you want to vomit, like those things really show you who you are.
Never been there in my life.
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you what's similar story for me is that's why I became a bodybuilder. I realized at a very young age that I identified as a very lazy human being, and I fucking hated it. It was the worst. I hated it because everyone else in my family was lazy, and I didn't want to be anything like them. And that's why I choose to be a bodybuilder. Most people think it was something to do with insecurity. Most people think it was something to do with vanity or you know, trying to cover something up. It was literally me just trying to become the best version of myself and realizing that the only way that I could become great at anything was to overcome that which held me back, which is my deepest fear of laziness. And man, now the reason I've retired, same idea, man. I've overcome it. Like I've proved that, you know, that my goal as a bodybuilder wasn't to win the Olympia, maybe wasn't to win the Arnold. You know, maybe it was something that becomes part of your presence, but it was really just to beat everyone that I went in the gym with. It's like I wanted to prove that I wasn't a lazy human being, and you know, it was such a great thing for me to become a confident man, to overcome that which was my greatest childhood fear.
I totally get that.
Yeah, I know you do, and that's why I resonate with all the stuff you're saying, because you saw yourself as a lazy guy and you said fuck this, put 2 middle fingers in the air, and you went after it, right?
100%.
Yeah, so you've got a hashtag that you use on your shirt. I have it written down here somewhere. Oh, there it is. TTFUBC, and it's perfect timing right now, right? We're talking about it. So what is it?
Toughen the fuck up, Buttercup.
Yeah, I love it,
Yeah.
man. And you have a story as to where it came from. I know you just kind of threw it out there, but I'd love to give our listeners a story.
Yeah, you know, I forget what the question was that was asked, but it was like, I just get questions all the time. Like, how can I do this? Like, oh, my life is so busy. Oh, this, that. I'm not smart enough. My background sucks. My family was poor. And it was just like, toughen the fuck up, Buttercup. Like, look, there's going to be 1,000 fucking excuses, but they all come down to you're accepting a low level of performance from yourself. Fucking suck it up and get it done. And at the end of the day, here's the really dark secret. That's the only piece of advice that's real. Everything else is like a variation on that theme. Everything else is like what you do after you've toughened the fuck up. But the first step is have the discipline to show up in the gym every day. Like have the discipline that when it sucks and when it hurts to push harder than the guy next to you. And then once you have that, then we can talk about the calculus of how you eat and how to carb cycle and all that shit. But if you don't have the discipline not to eat when you're hungry, like I can't help you. So you've got to fucking man up, like period. And yeah, people don't always want to hear that, and I get it. But like until you overcome that, you are fucked.
The reason I laugh when you say it is because I have a very similar one that I use all the time here at my gym with my staff is take your balls out of your purse and man the fuck up. So my staff
Exactly.
and all my followers enjoy that one. You got to take your balls out of your purse at least once a day.
Yes.
That's always the analogy. So one of the things that I think our listeners are going to be very interested to hear is, you took this company, which was zero. You started from nothing. And you took it to $1 billion company. That in itself is a 3-hour podcast, and I know we don't want to go there, but some of the lessons you learned along the way from a business perspective, maybe some of the mistakes that you made that have become your greatest teaching tools.
Yeah. So mistakes, there are many. And the one that I think really hit me the most profoundly is around culture. And as you scale, like scaling culture is hard as hell. And what I learned is I am a terrible manager. Terrible manager. I'm a good leader, man. And when people are around me, like when it's a group of people and they see me work every day, and all I have to do is lead by example, fuck yes. And I am good at that. And when we first started the company, it was all manufacturing all day. That's all I did. So I was wearing a hairnet and a lab coat and gloves, and I would show up and just bust ass. And I would ask the guys on the line, what's the worst job? And that's the job I would take. And I would bring energy and enthusiasm and fun to the table and show them that you can bust ass, hold yourself to a high standard, and have a good time doing it. Like, it doesn't have to be a slog. I'm not going to fucking whine. I'm not going to piss and moan. Like, I'm just going to get this done. And so that was awesome. And I had, like, those guys are diehard for me even to this day. So that was a really amazing period for me. Then as we grew and I didn't understand the difference between a leader and a manager, then it was like, what is happening? The core group around me still felt the same because they could see how hard I worked. I was always trying to make their life easier. I wanted good things for them. I was trying to help them become what they wanted to become and all that. But like, as you went 2 and 3 like deviations away from that, like, it depended on what you encountered. Imagine for a second that your only encounter with me, I look at you and I say, toughen the fuck up, Buttercup. And you're like, what the fuck? This guy's a dick. So it's like, that was a weird adjustment for me, realizing that as you scale, like, it's not enough to say something true. You've got to say it in a way that can be heard. And it's critical to have good managers. Because when somebody gives themselves to your company, if you don't have people in place to help them figure out how to navigate it, to help them get the most out of it, to understand what their career path is, like, you're doing them a disservice. And so in the core of my heart, I wanted good things for them. I wanted to do amazing shit. My promise to everyone at the company was, I want Quest to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And I just I was able to deliver on it for some percentage of the people that resonated with my natural ways. Like, if you wanted to be pushed, if you didn't want someone sitting over your shoulder, like, I was your guy. But if you needed, like, somebody really to be there and help you and create that path and show you that way forward and really mentor you, like, I just wasn't your guy. So that was a super important lesson for me, because now in building impact theory, like, understanding that I'm not a good manager. And which this doesn't bother me at all, but it's important for me to recognize, I don't want to be a good manager. It's not a skill set that I value in myself. So, but I'm looking at Agent Smith, who's a fucking extraordinary manager. And good Lord, if we didn't have him, we'd be in real trouble. So yeah, things like that, being honest with where your skill set is, what skill set you want to develop, that stuff is critical.
So can you talk about the 25, I don't know exactly, the list of 25 attributes, or I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but the list of 25 characteristics you developed for the culture, maintaining the culture at Quest?
Yeah, the belief system. Yeah. So the belief system was not only what I thought it's the 25 things you need to do to your mind to succeed at the highest level. And it wasn't the 25 things I thought you needed to do just to succeed at Quest. It is the 25 things that you need to do to succeed anywhere. And so you'll see that, like, it's the same bullet points that we use now at Impact Theory. Like, they're universal. And I'm in the process of writing a book now. It'll be about the 25 bullet points, because those really are the things you have to do to your mind in order to succeed at the highest level. And I wanted people we were doing a job fair, and we had people lined up around the block to interview for a job at Quest. And I wanted people to know what was going to be expected of them. Now, this is what I believe anyone should expect of themselves if they want to achieve greatness. Which, by the way, if you go to impacttheory.com and sign up for our newsletter, we give you a nice version you can print out and hang up. They are the 25 most important things any human being can do to their mind. So, but then so when people were literally, they were lined up, and I wrote this really fast, and I said, just hand this to everyone in line. And we tried to like make it better later, and it was like so sort of core and fundamental to the human condition that they just stuck. And so that really was the first time I ever tried to like get out what I had spent the last 20 years of my life doing to my own mind, to stop being lazy, to be able to take control of my life, to take extreme ownership, to really be able to execute. Because I don't think anybody should focus on like who they are today. I'm not worried about that. I'm not hiring you for the skill set that you already have. I'm hiring you for the skill set that you are willing to break yourself in half to attain.
Right. I always say that with my staff is I get compliments that I have the greatest staff in the world. And I said, I've never hired a skill set. I hire for personality. You have to, right? Like you can teach anybody a skill set, but you can't teach a personality. So awesome, man. So you brought up the word ownership, and I think that's massive. But what I'd like for you to walk through is everyone makes excuses around time in their day. How do you balance it all? So can you give me a rundown of what your day looks like, and how scheduled are you? And just like a rundown of the day.
Yeah, so I'm uber hardcore about how I spend my time. This is a
podcasting
real,
with me.
100%. And look, if this didn't move me towards my goals, I wouldn't do it. So, but my highest goal is to pull people out of the matrix. So any chance I get an opportunity to speak to people at scale about the things you need to do to your mind, like that's my fucking mission in life. So justifying doing podcasts is pretty easy. Also, it helps build my awareness. So, I mean, that's just one way to explain why I do these. But so I'm super hardcore about how I spend my time. Going to bed early and on time is like step number one. So I prioritize sleep. Why? Because I cognitively optimize. Like everything I do in my life is around cognitive optimization. So I go to bed at 9 p.m. like it's a religion. I do not use an alarm. I haven't used an alarm in over 15 years. I sleep until I wake up, and that's it. So some days that's 5 hours, and some days that's 8 hours. Doesn't matter. I get as much sleep as I need. Now, I'm always hoping that it's as little as possible, but never less than 5. So if I wake up and I've only gotten 4 hours sleep, I will lay in bed for hours trying to fall back asleep. Again, because cognitive optimization. I find that if I get less than 5 hours, I'm just too tired to function at a high level.
Yep, agree.
So if I've gotten at least 5 hours, I have 10 minutes to get out of bed. So I lay there for roughly 9 minutes. I get up. I immediately go to the gym. I work out for about an hour.
Empty stomach, fasted?
Yeah, fasted.
No coffee.
So in fact, I'll even walk you through what I do with food and water. So Sweet. I have water only in the gym, no flavoring, nothing, just straight ice cold water. Then when I finish the gym, I immediately go and I put a Monster in the freezer, and I then meditate. I meditate for about 20 minutes, and that's about the right time for the Monster to have just slightly started to slush. I take that, I open it, I go through a process I call Think-a-tation. So leveraging the alpha wave buzz that you get on meditation, and the alpha wave state is where you're calm and creative. And then I think over whatever the biggest problem is that I'm facing in the business. And I just let my mind wander. And I continue my breathing from the meditative state to make sure that I stay in that state, but I no longer try to stop myself from thinking. Just let my mind go. I usually do that for about 20, 30 minutes, and then I read. Depending on what time I woke up will determine how long I read for, but ideally it's about an hour. I read based on goals. So right now I'm absolutely obsessed with functional medicine and the microbiome. So, and because my wife is struggling, she's much better now.
Have you read Power, Sex, and Suicide?
I have not, but that's an awesome title.
Right, add it to your collection.
All right,
microbiome.
Power, Sex, and Suicide.
Yeah.
All right.
It's microbiome. Nice. It's interesting, right? But it's a fantastic book on the microbiome.
Okay. Definitely. Thank you. And then, so I read, and then I have an important things list, and I immediately go into my important things list, and I just start going through it. And that's the most important things I could be doing for the business. And I religiously go through that, and I live in that whenever humanly possible through the day. Depending on what time I wake up, I work anywhere for like 5 to 8 hours before my first employee shows up. And then once they get here, then starting at about 10 o'clock, all hell breaks loose. So I don't schedule anything before 10 o'clock. And by the way, you'll notice the one thing that is very absent from my morning routine, there's actually two things: food and email. So I never check email. I'm scary religious about that. And it's so funny. If you watch my content and you ask me, what email can I contact you at? I immediately write you off. I don't fucking do email. So email is in fact, you should be ashamed every time you go into your email, because what you're saying is somebody else knows better what I should be doing with my time to build my business than me. That's just crazy to me. So I don't check email. Full disclosure, my assistant looks for anything that's like an inbound opportunity, because I get it. The rest of the world does email. If I look at, and I'm not kidding, if I look at 7 emails in a week, it would be startling. That's even with my assistant going through them, for the record. So I take my first meeting or create my first piece of content starting at 10 a.m. And if I'm intermittent fasting, my first meal is at between 11:30 and 1. If I'm in a high protein phase and I'm not doing, because I only do intermittent fasting when I'm ketogenic. But if I'm high protein like I am now, my first meal is somewhere around 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then I eat. So if I'm intermittent fasting, my first meal is around 12-ish, 1-ish, somewhere in there. And then my next meal will be at 3. My next meal will be at 7. And then usually that's my last meal of the night. And then if I'm doing high protein, I'll eat at 8:39, 11:33, 7:30-ish, and maybe even one more meal right before I go to bed at like 8:30.
You're training, right now, is it training for maintenance? Are you training for a specific goal? Are you just trying to look awesome? What's your training look like?
It depends on the time of year. So in the summer, I'm training to at all times I'm training for strength. But and maintenance at a minimum, but in the summer I do try to get nice and lean. So, and I'll carry that through. So I'll up my cardio. I'll work out at a cardio pace. So no rest between sets, things like that. And then when I go into the holiday season, because I know my calories are going to be periodically spiked, I still eat clean. I like true cheating where I'm like intaking breads and sugars and things like that. Man, if I do that 5 or 6 times a year, it'd be a lot. So I really don't cheat, but there are times where I spike my calories significantly. And certainly at holiday, I'll do around Christmas, I'll do a full like 10 days where I'll eat as many calories as I want. All clean calories, but I'll eat as many as I want. And so during that time, then I know that like I'm just intaking enough calories. I should be thinking bulk. So my strategy will be a little bit different.
Are you following an MI40 program?
I don't even know what that is. So probably not would be my guess.
That's my muscle building brand, man.
My man. So I have failed you on that one.
We'll have to get you hooked up, man. Truthfully, that's what we're the best in the world at. And that's kind of what people know me for, is muscle intelligence approach to training. So that's why people know my name, but not you.
Unfortunately, dude, I'm telling you, I do not like working out. I am not into
I won't hold it against you, man.
Stuff.
I won't hold it against you. It's all good. I always assume most people don't know who the hell I am, but I'm grateful.
I am the same.
How do you hack your sleep? Do you have a protocol? Obviously, I'm sure you're aware of your environment. Are you doing any supplements to help you sleep?
No, I literally try to exhaust myself by going hard during the day and then just get to bed at 9 p.m. That's it.
Sweet, man. Well, I'll tell you what, man. I've got about a zillion other questions I could ask you, but I won't. Actually, no, there's one more I want to ask you I thought was really cool. Is you have a genie analogy, a magic genie analogy. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, so this started as an interview question when I was really trying to figure out what people value. And I think that's incredibly important, like really figuring out what people value in their life. So it goes like this. If a magic genie showed up right now and gave you one wish and one wish only, you couldn't ask for more wishes, can't cure cancer, bring somebody back from the dead. It's got to be something for yourself. What do you wish for?
So you asked that during like a hiring interview?
Yeah. And people's answers will fascinate you.
I like it. I might start using it, and I'm sure a lot of other people will. Tom, where can people reach you?
At Tom Bilyeu across all socials. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on all of them. I'm very active socially. And if you ever get a like, a heart, a comment, anything, it's actually me.
I think I got some hearts on there somewhere.
My man. So yeah, truly that's all me. So I do all the engagement myself.
Tom, let's do a selfie. Hold on. I've never done this before.
Let's do it.
Cool, man. It's going on my social. I'll tag you.
Awesome.
All right, buddy. I appreciate you, man. I really appreciate your time. And I'm going to reach out to you about some other things. I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic, absolutely amazing. And if anybody isn't already following Tom, get over there now because this guy's going to change the world in the next coming years. So thank you very much, man.